Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Podstash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. Visit thedankpodstash.com, where you'll find our shop, calendar of events, and more. Become a patron or BitBacker and join us in our private Discord server, where you'll have access to live shows and post-show Q&As.
Business owners, you can advertise on the Dank Podstash, reach a larger audience, and make more sales. Just email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com for more details.
We are live for episode 33 of Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. Episode 33.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about conspiracies with Jeremy Harding. But before we jump into it, let me just give our shout out to our friend Shane Radliff over at Liberty Under Attack Publications. And our usual reminder that if you go over to libertyunderattack.com, you can take 10% off your order by using coupon code DANK10. And he has books focusing on self-liberation, freedom strategies, solutions, and more. His current books are #Agora, the Second Realm book on strategy, Ben Stone's Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, Field Manual #1, and Shane's very own Vanu, A Strategy for Self-Liberation, all of which are right here. A little bit of glare. That's a little better. Kinda. You can kind of see them, kind of not if you're watching on YouTube. If not, either way, go check out libertyunderattack.com. Share your story, find your freedom, and they offer assistance with new authors throughout the entire publishing process as well. So remember, if you go to libertyunderattack.com, use code DANK10 for 10% off of your order.
And I don't know about the deal that they have, or that they were going to make the announcement, but I can vouch for Shane Radliff. He's a good guy, and I've had him on my show multiple times back when I had it. Vanu's definitely a good lifestyle to research.
Absolutely. And then we're here as usual with David Ballantyne, and David has something, a little shout out for us.
Yeah, you got to check out Agorist Nexus at agoristnexus.com, because they got a lot of good stuff. It's seeming to be, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but we're on there.
Yeah.
And seems to be kind of a marketplace of sorts, almost a gray black market, what have you. And you can have your stuff listed on there, or you can find cool stuff on there to buy. So check that out. That's agoristnexus.com.
Hell yeah. Sick. So we're going to get deep. We lost our original 33rd episode, and we're replacing that with this one for now, and we'll have our guests from that episode back on and at a later time. But Jeremy pointed out how this could possibly be a conspiracy that leads into this conspiracy episode. Why don't you tell them the significance of 33?
It's the 33rd degree Freemasons. There's a lot of speculation that those are the ones that run everything at this particular point, or at least had a significant hand in a lot of recent conspiracies like Bush family shit and a lot of stuff like that. So it's just, that if anybody listens to Immortal Technique, you've heard the line from Freedom of Speech where it's 33 degrees, motherfucker, go home and figure it out. That's what he was talking about.
I do get down on some Immortal Technique.
But
definitely good shit.
Yeah, and everybody Immortal Technique hangs with is also reasonable. Like, pretty normally their music has some really good message about either self-liberation or trying to grind against the system. So would heavily like Ill Bill, Vinnie Paz, Jedi Mind Tricks, all those people, fantastic people.
Hell yeah. Speaking of Freemasons, so that's one, I guess, conspiracy, although I think it's absolutely true, is the reason that their floors are the black and white checkerboard to represent base knowledge.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere, from, Buckingham Palace to a whole lot of different, I guess, highly influential places have that black and white checkerboard.
Yeah. Well, and, color in Freemasonry is huge. Like, they all symbolize certain aspects of like following that order. And for instance, blue is the highest degree, and they claim to own the color blue. So I mean, fucking anything blue automatically has that potential significance. I mean, you know, because I don't know how much stock to put in Freemasons being in control of everything. They certainly have a significant amount of authority in certain circles, but there's also, like, you know, Freemasons. There's the Skull and Bones Society. There's I mean, the Bilderberg Group, which is being super secretive this year compared to other years. But like, people can then read into the symbols and think that, you know, if somebody makes a certain gesture, like you know, if I have my hand over my eye, somebody can take a picture of this and be like, oh, he's a Mason.
Yeah.
Even if I'm just clutching my face.
You see that on the celebrity news all the time. That, or the thing over the eye like that.
Yeah, or this one.
Yeah, that one. Yep.
But I see, that's the thing. That's one of the conspiracies that's harder to pin down, because like, whatever they do that is nefarious is more elusive than, for instance, them building parts of your town and putting their logo on it. So I don't put as much effort into the Freemason thing, because until there's like some secret recording of their meetings, I won't have a whole lot of information on it. Because, like, that's part of how they operate. Once you raise levels, you get access to that level's meetings. And until you get to a high enough degree, you can't know how the higher degrees are operating. So, you know, I mean, even if you talk to one of the people at the second to lowest rung, like somebody I know claims to be, he said that everything's on the up and up, that everything's fine, that it's actually not a problem. And I'm like, yeah, or maybe they just haven't told you everything because you're not at the top. Maybe being at the top is what you get after you've done a significant amount of capitulation to whatever their rights and orders are. He's like, nah, man, it's totally legit. And I'm like, well, have you ever been in those meetings? Because I don't think so. You know, there's too much coincidence with Freemasons and power plays, and, you know, the history of international affairs, like, you know, where the bloodlines go, they always seem to have at least a little bit influence from several ruling families, and the Illuminati, and which, you know, means to illuminate with their, you know, human approaching divine knowledge, at least they arrogantly claim. All these institutions that are relatively closely connected to those in power do seem to be a conspiracy. But since people can't plant a direct tie to a conspiracy, I'm not going to be one of those people who draws lines based on my assumptions. Because I could come up with a ton of assumptions and none of them are good, but, you know, there are verifiable conspiracies that I could go into that aren't the Freemasons.
Sure.
So that's what I normally focus on, is the stuff that people can actually, like, really sink their teeth into and point at.
Well, regardless if the Illuminati or the Freemasons, like, are some widespread conspiracy, you know, there are people that are named in that conspiracy that are the oligarchs and in charge of everything. So they should be looked at a certain level of scrutiny regardless.
Well, and, you know, if you're an anarchist, which we are, it's easier to say that there's a conspiracy because we don't consider the state a benevolent entity. I mean, the definition of a conspiracy isn't aliens. The definition of a conspiracy is to plot against somebody in secret. And they're plotting against us in secret. Right. It's a big conspiracy, unironically. And that's what people don't understand. Like, I could blow past, like, you know, and it's... people are going to possibly say that we're fucking ripping off James Corbett, but we can show you the fucking receipts because we planned to do this episode days before his episode on conspiracies came out. But 4 out of the 5 of those conspiracies actually are very legitimate ones to look into. So, and I only say 4 out of 5 because the 5th one about turning frogs female, that one is something that people took seriously for a while because a largely discredited scientists got on places like Democracy Now! And so I'm not gonna give that guy undue credence because it appears his research was methodologically flawed. And I'm not gonna be an anti-science conspiracy theorist. Like, I might as well just adopt flat earthism and say that we're, created by an all-knowing God and the firmament broke like 20 years ago because the bitch got horny, so...
Okay. I hadn't heard about any of that shit. I'll look into flat earth. It just seems too ridiculous.
Oh, well, I mean, if you start looking into flat earth as a part of biblical scholarship, it clicks. It's sort of like, where did the rings go when Sonic collects them? Well, he just absorbs them. Well, then wouldn't his mass increase? Shut up, it's Sonic. And it's sort of like that with the flat earth thing because, it makes sense in the context of the Bible. Or various other religious texts. It makes sense if you believe in a creator who's holding this shit together instead of like energetic forces in the universe that we can physically manifest and observe. And it makes sense if you think Noah's Ark was real and there was a firmament that broke and it rained 40 days and 40 nights and, he fit all the animals on a boat and they all had fucked and, it makes sense from that perspective because you're like, yeah, the Bible says this, so these people's models where they draw the flat earth or have like their bullshit dome over everything, that makes sense. Instead of being like, hey, this is all bullshit because you have like a rational mind. And I don't mean to just like atheism plus this whole fucking stream, but at the same time, that's where the flat earth get a lot of their stuff. It's confirmation bias. Their religion says something, so flat earth.
Right.
Yeah.
I gotta apologize right now for my mouth breathing. I'm just being attacked by allergies today, so if you hear heavy breathing, it's not just because I'm excited. It's because of allergies. So.
Yeah, or it's the demon we're keeping in our closet that's telling us what to say.
That's right. So.
You got Baphomet hanging out with you guys.
Baphomet would not fit in that closet. He needs like that corner of the room. That's where he is. Like
we'd have him in frame. That'd be way too cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on something you mentioned coincidences before, and that's something that a lot of people point at, especially from what I've seen when people are arguing 9/11. Like just because there's coincidences doesn't mean it's a conspiracy.
Yeah,
I agree with that. And I don't jump on board with like the holographic plane theory or direct energy weapon stuff for 9/11, but I think it was government orchestrated. And a lot of people say to that, well, there's no way they'd be able to keep it a secret. They can't fucking make a ham sandwich. So how would they keep it a secret?
Well, and that's okay. So
well, they didn't.
See, this is one of my key problems with modern discourse is that people use that goddamn stupid fucking razor, which is never a tribute to malice, what can adequately be described with incompetence.
Yeah, Occam's razor.
No, that's just whatever is easiest is true. But
yeah,
but it's just such a dumb assertion that politicians are just stupid. Yeah, some of them might be useful idiots, but all of the politicians would benefit from you having that like assumption. All politicians would love for people to think that they were just like some benevolent idiot who was trying real hard but he couldn't quite do it. They would love that because it means that when they're being smart, you don't get to say shit because you've already called them stupid, so you can't then go back on it and say, yeah, they're not very smart, but they also orchestrated all this terrible stuff, but they're retarded.
Yeah.
So like it's a dumb way to circumvent the actual conversation to say that it couldn't be malice or that I shouldn't assume it's malice when these people have all of the fucking profit motive to be malicious. It's like No, that's not how logic works. Logic says you look for motive, you assess possible means to achieve that motive, and then eventually you know, try to pin certain events together so that you can come out with like enough of a methodology that you could then assert that a crime has been committed. But it's after all of those steps, and you circumvent all of that by saying, nah, he just dumb like me. You know, so I don't fucking, those people piss me off on some extreme level.
It's a pretty easy path to follow, in my opinion. And I might be wrong about some the information I may have gotten might be wrong, but the transfer of insurance or re-upping of insurance, yeah. And the guy who owned the buildings, who was at lunch every single day, same food, just happened to not be there that one day in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
Announcing trillions missing from the Pentagon. And those offices just happened to get hit there.
And they were doing budget analysis in the Pentagon and storing some documents in World Trade Center 7, which, whoops, that collapsed, but there was no plane.
Right.
You know?
Well, and so what do you think of the video with the charges?
I mean, I think that there's a possibility it was explosives, but I also think there's a possibility that the plane just hit enough of the load-bearing structure low enough down that the steel didn't melt. Okay. Here's where I get
could that plane penetrate to that center structure? Because when you look at the World Trade Center, it's the center.
Yeah, well, I mean, because that's the thing, is that most of the structure itself was not based on I-beams sticking up. That would be very heavy and it would fall down in an earthquake. A lot of the load-bearing stuff was like aluminum. But, you know, so yeah, theoretically. But my point is that this is where I break off in terms of this. Because, yes, it could have been full of explosives or it could have, you know, been a plane. I think that it's possible that it was explosives, but I also think that those explosives were triggered by the heat from the plane. I think that that was what they were relying on, instead of having this, like, massive conspiracy. And I think, in fact, the building was supposed to fall faster.
Huh.
I think that the fact that it took so long is because certain charges didn't go off in the chain that they were supposed to go off in. And that's why they had to, like, excavate it slowly, because they had to remove evidence that they planted bombs. You know, oh, they would never bomb citizens. That's terrible. Yeah, look at the Philadelphia Move bombing. You know, I mean, they dropped a satchel of C4 on the roof and let the motherfucker burn. So, I mean, yeah, they would bomb civilians.
Sure.
But my particular gripe with the 9/11 thing is that people say jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams and then post the pictures of the ground level cut off beams that look like they were cut off with thermite. Two problems with that idea. First off, these pictures were taken after they already started to disassemble the wreckage of the building, and they might have done that with fucking arc torches or, you know, thermite, instead of, like, having that be part of the conspiracy where it's like jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. Maybe just focus on the financial motive and the fact that World Trade Center 7 fell down without any fucking effort.
Follow the money.
Yeah. Follow the money, you'll find the conspiracy. You don't need jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, and you don't need, it was, you know, 100% explosive, there was no plane. You don't need either of those for 9/11 truth. And so if you break it down, if you look at this like a criminal justice, like, prosecutor, investigator, whatever, and you take out all the elements that aren't necessary to the actual investigation, you can see it has the money, it has the profit potential, it has the ease of access, it has all that's necessary. That's 3,000 employees gone, I think it was, that were normally there. They just were told not to show up. And, you know, all these things really kind of tend to lend to a conspiracy, but everybody's so distracted with all this minutia, like DEWs and fucking jet fuel, and nobody looks into the actual, like, verified elements of the conspiracy, and it makes us look like we're just a bunch of fucking, like, basement losers with time on our hands.
Do you think that's by design, though? Do you think that information was put out there to
Oh,
discredit?
hella.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
So what do you think about was it
Yeah.
Rothschild or Rockefeller and his speech talking about one large tragedy, very violent tragedy needed to pass legislation that would give more control.
Yeah. Ordo ab Chao.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let no good crisis go to waste.
Yes.
Like the guy who was behind SEIU or something like that said that. And that's like their modus operandi has been for decades, where they'll start some shit and then it'll like set something off. Like even for a century, if you look as far back as like the Gulf of Tonkin incident and like, you know, USS Liberty, Lusitania, fucking all these false flag events, and Pearl Harbor. They knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen and they let it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That pisses me off so much when people are like, oh, but we needed to get into the war then.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so do you think that I've seen many different, I guess, albums that people have compiled, compilations of pictures of, what is it, Rockefeller-produced television and other media like magazines and stuff where the clocks are always set to 9/11. There's always a 9/11 somewhere within the series or in the magazine. Like on his cover of Time magazine, he had his arms crossed with a watch like this that you'd see if you're watching on YouTube, which you should subscribe to YouTube, comment, like. And his watch is set to 9/11 on the Time magazine cover.
Well, I would have to see the actual cover, because that I could Photoshop.
Sure,
that.
sure.
Like, I think I would have to have a copy of the magazine or see something on microfiche or something.
Right.
Which I wouldn't mind seeing, you know, if anybody's got access to that. But, you know, I mean, then is where you get into potential for another, like, useless rabbit trail. They call it CIA. If you go on globalresearch.ca, there's a treasure trove of information there, and I would recommend everybody go there. They're one of the sites Facebook and other social media companies censor. And they have a shit ton of really good, like, academically sourced information. And one of the stories that they talked about was the fact that the CIA has what they call story within a story distractionary tactics. And what this means is that the distraction is what you can find when you start digging. So there's the possibility that 9/11 thing is true and that was some sort of signal to the elites, or there's a possibility that they've planted that in conspiratarian circles because you can find a picture of people with times on their watches and it's relatively easy to say, see, that happened.
Sure.
I know. I try not to.
I think a lot of that.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of that is just people looking for it all over the place, you know?
Yeah. Well, and when
for
you
something,
start
you're
looking
gonna
for
find
it, you're going to find what you want, at least in piecemeal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Instead of like, because I have like files on my computer that I look to. I have a set of totally legal books on everything from like aliens to like possessions and, you know, literal books on witchcraft and shit, and like, because I study this stuff because the elites do verifiably use esoteric symbology to discuss a lot of things in public that they can't, you know, just come out and say like, hey, we're witches. They have to like hide it in media and shit. So, you know, there is something to that, but you know, part of the thing that you learn when you start looking into this stuff is that if there is truth, it's buried under so many grains of fiction. So you've got to know what to cut out. And as far as I'm concerned, until I see evidence that, you know, unless I hold that magazine in my hand and then also trace it back to the photographer and follow the rabbit hole.
Sure.
Just simply saying it isn't enough for me. It just, even if it's totally real, it might be a coincidence. I don't know, and I kind of, like, my brain wants to say no, because, like, I've got my lizard brain that tells me, hey, this stuff is real, and if I say no, I might be losing something, but then my, you know, fucking superego and ego kick in, and I'm like, wait, maybe this is bullshit. And that's what I think a lot of conspiratarians don't get. They just see all these connections, and even if it leads nowhere, they're fine with the information being presented as like an a la carte dish or something.
Yeah. Fuck. There's really no need to. I guess there's no need to follow that shit if you follow the verifiable stuff, like we were saying, follow the money, because that stuff is there in public record. So
yeah, and also follow the fact that they lost a shit ton of records. Like, we know about MK Ultra because of documents that were discovered after a lot of the MK Ultra documents were destroyed. And I can go over MK Ultra as a conspiracy too. I know probably too much about that. But the same, like, so what we know about MK Ultra is bad enough. What they destroyed is probably worse, because why would you destroy the less good stuff, or sorry, the less bad stuff before you destroy the worst stuff if you're trying to preserve your image or something, or protect the researchers, or, you know, what they really were, which is like post-Nazi paperclip scientists trying to torture people to figure out how best to torture people. Separate subject.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always finding another piece of information that you need to be looking for. It's not finding that one and then saying, we got it, we're done. It's finding that one and then following those leads to figure out all the different layers below that. It's sort of like opening a context menu on a web page. When you click one button, a bunch more pop up down here.
Right. I want to kind of jump to a different subject. We were talking on the way over here about being called, what is it, a postmodern neo-Marxist because of telling people about what you think about human nature, which I happen to agree with. But as far as postmodernism, neo-Marxism, whatever, have you seen the video of the interview with the former KGB agent who is explaining the plan to bring Marxism, or cultural Marxism, whatever, into the schooling system in the U.S., to bring communism to the U.S.?
I haven't. Do you have that available?
I don't have it. I was hoping you had seen it. I think I actually have it in my emails. I could pull it up, but...
Well, if you pull it up, I'll watch it. We'll pull a Joe Rogan and I'll watch it live on the stream.
Yeah.
But I mean, that sort of doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, the school system will adopt whatever it can to better control people. So I mean, yeah, that could be a very strong possibility to be true. But at the same time, they're also importing fascist techniques. Like, we wouldn't have the Pledge of Allegiance if it weren't for this symbol. Like, right. Where people, like, they used to pledge like that. It wasn't hand over heart, like, I love this country. It was Sieg Heil the USA.
Well, it originated with the Roman salute, correct?
Yes, yeah.
There it is. It's called How to Brainwash a Nation on YouTube. And I don't think we can play the audio, or the video will get pulled, but interview was conducted in 1985 with a trained subversive KGB agent named Yuri Bezmenov.
Well, I'll watch it with CCs on, with no volume.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that should work. But 8 minutes and 47 seconds.
Yeah, it's pretty long to watch during the episode.
Well, let's see if I can get some liner notes here.
Sure. Yeah, but it's interesting. I believe, hopefully I'm not misquoting the video or telling the wrong thing here, but it was when a hot war was not an option, when we weren't going to bomb or each other or go to actual war, this being the Russia and the U.S. There's a lot of intelligence battles, obviously, because there was, was it the moon race and all that stuff, and nuclear arms race, of course. And so they very wisely decided to undermine the learning system in the U.S. in order to gain a foothold here, and they're playing the long game and not just the short game. Yeah.
It's very interesting. That the whole moon race thing is another conspiracy to get into right there.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I don't think we didn't go to the moon. I think we went to the moon. I'm not we didn't go to the moon kind of guy. I think a lot of the pictures that people point to as fake, that were doctored and whatnot, were put out as promo pictures, you know, and I don't think it was ever hidden that they were doctored. I think that's a thing that people would just kind of cling on to.
Yeah.
But
that's been said that it was a thing that they were doctored, and a lot of the images, like, they had to deal with exposure because the reflection of the sun off the surface of the moon was so bright.
Sure.
They had to change the exposure on the cameras. So.
As well as radiation effect on film.
All right. Well, I've seen the executive summary of what he's talking about, and I mean, yeah, you could certainly embed some ideological, like, psychological warfare in children because they're easy to ply, but I think that if they are doing that, it's much more to the basis, especially in the modern day, because that was taken like probably 50 years ago.
Right. The interview is 85, and I believe they said the program started in the 60s.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, yeah, because there was probably more of the Red Scare back then.
Sure.
Still. So they probably wouldn't talk about right-wing influence in school because right-wing influence would just be the counter to the communist menace. So I'm assuming that they were being hyper-focused on that issue because people were afraid of it, not because it was especially different to any other form of ideological subversion. Because it's all trying to control people, even if it's not communist. So, I mean,
Sure.
That's what school is for. It comes from the imported Prussian school model. That's the reason they called it that. So... You know, I like maybe that's happening. I wouldn't say it's happening exotically more, like as far as I'm aware, than it is for
You
any
wouldn't
other
think
ideology.
there's more state socialist, state communist leaning in schools by both faculty and students these days than then? Because I think there absolutely is.
It depends on the school. It depends on what they get funding to do, and it also largely depends on whether or not those schools are trying for a specific educational model to get more positive results on their testing. I'm a cynical asshole. I don't think that these teachers actually authentically believe in socialism or know its tenets, have read Das Kapital or any of these, you know, fucking Bakunin, fucking Bakunin anyway. Any of these fucking, like, authentically socialist authors, speakers, activists, whatever. I don't think they read that. I don't think they know what the tenets are. So I think that really they just go with whatever model can get them the best numbers at the end of the year. And that so happens to be an ideology of rinsing and repeating. Now, how do you get that ideology of rinsing and repeating so that your students can absorb information like a sponge and then squeeze it onto a test form? You tell them that everybody's equal. You tell them to get along, to work together. And that means that even if they don't like the person, they have to, you know, act like they like them. It's a very social conformist model. And it's easier to like...
Yeah,
it's easier to not like people less. Double negative, whatever. It's easier to like people more if you're treated as though you're equal to them than if you are treated as though it's a meritocracy. If it's a meritocracy, then you can't say, it's not fair, I want X. If it's a meritocracy, you have to say, I didn't do Z, so I didn't get Y. So, when you have this model where you're trying to get social conformity, promises of equality, although vapid and probably not only unproductive, but impossible, is far superior to a meritocratic system. And the only exception are people who are in the advanced placement programs, and the only reason they exist at all is because it gets people into college easier. So, I mean, it's still essentially like the meritocracy is still just to get people pumped into the whatever system can make them the most money. And it being that kind of for-profit, high-control system, any socialist worth their salt would tell you that that's a bad socialist if they are one.
Word.
Yeah, that's a lot of information.
Working on the stream over there?
I was making sure it was okay.
You know, this is what happens. I get some rainbow unicorn in me and I fucking start spouting.
whatever rainbow unicorn's a code name for.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and apparently unicorns are also symbolic. They're like,
Sure.
I don't know.
I hope there's a lot of symbolism out there. One of my favorites, though, is the symbol of the comet and the rebirth or destruction that it brings, both in Freemasonry and a lot of the other mystery traditions, and then tying that into with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson's research about comet impact 12,000 years ago, ending the last ice age.
Mm-hmm.
Love that shit.
Of course, a lot of these comet people thought it was going to fucking happen again in 2012, and that didn't pan out. So
Sure. Well, it's a looming thing too. This is a thing that's actually not a conspiracy during our conspiracy episode, but we're within 30 years of passing through. I can't remember the name of the belt, but the rubble belt with the leftovers from the last impact with comet fragments and asteroids and all that. And it's a daily thing that we could be struck by a world-ending piece of space junk.
well, and that's one of the reasons that the flat earthers think NASA's lying, because if you can have massive directed energy weapons, which do exist, that can shoot out missiles out of the sky, then you could also have one to shoot a rock out of the sky that they propelled into the air and create a fake catastrophe. You know, but on a conspiratorial level, like, I'm less concerned about these comets, which they can likely destroy with directed energy weapons, and more concerned with the fact that cosmological radiation is at all-time highs, and the fucking planet might burn.
Sure.
Like, and that's part of the thing. Like, the elites have the Georgia Guidestones, which advise a population of under 500 million. Was
that Agenda 21? What is that?
I mean, it might be concurrent to that, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But I like, the Georgia Guidestones were an art installation, and, you know, people claim that it's just a joke, but I can't buy that, knowing what's on those stones and the fact that it's comporting with so many of the elite's current plans. Either way, what I know for a fact is that the Georgia Guidestones do seem to comport with the elite's idea of a breakaway civilization. I'll be making a video at some point on all this breakaway stuff, but the lie that people get told is that breakaway civilizations are somehow an alien idea, that they're like trying to exploit us Earthlings and they're aliens. I don't buy that element. What I do buy is that they're exploiting worker labor so that they can build their underground civilizations, and eventually they're going to enact what's written on the Georgia Guidestones, bring us all down to below 500 million people, and hide under the ground in their bunkers while we're up here suffering the consequences. You know, whatever the consequences are, biological warfare from, you know, spraying contaminants into clouds like they have done multiple times. Like the Corbett episode, which people should watch, about conspiracies recently, went over chemtrails as part of their thing. And chemtrails are admitted by the United States government now. They just say that they're primarily for climate control. Maybe? I mean, like, there's, I guess, a possibility of that, but there's also so many other possibilities about what they're spraying in the sky. And a lot of what this amounts to, according to some people who are very keyed into conspiracies, is testing systems to see what's the optimal coverage rate so that when they do put something evil in there, we all have to suffer. Well, why would they do that? They breathe the same air. Well, yeah, but they're also inoculating kids forced with vaccinations and telling adults that they have to get them too. So they could be putting something in those vaccinations that makes us extra susceptible to whatever they have an antibody that they got injected with. So, I mean, it's one of those areas that I don't tread into very often because I don't want to seem like the guy who's just going off of everything. Like, I talked about that kind of person earlier, and I don't want to be him. But at the same time, if they wanted to, they could.
So
and
you touched on they're breathing the same air, because we're already on chemtrails, so I got questions. Because that's a hotly debated thing, especially in the anarchist community, because people don't want us to look like fucking idiots. And,
Well,
crazy conspiracy theorists.
Debatable, because, I mean,
Well,
we're not
people
looking
within.
like idiots because of the fucking chemtrail conspiracies and,
Sure.
tinfoil, etc. We're idiots because we're fucking being capitalists who say anybody who isn't capitalist should die, or being communists who say anybody who isn't communist should die. So, I mean, ultimately, like, there's idiots no matter what, but go ahead.
Well, it's just like you said, it's a thing that they have admitted to spreading out different particulates for different reasons in the air. And a lot of people, like, the most black and white argument from people who are against that whole conspiracy is that it's just vapor trails.
Yeah, well, it could be, or it could be the fact that there's plane patents for planes that distribute particulate matter, and there's admittance from geoforming, or geoengineering researchers that that they do in fact spray metal alloys to try and concentrate cloud vapors to reflect the sunlight.
Right.
I mean, so there is that. They've admitted to it. And like, they've also admitted to, in the past, using this for biological warfare in the form of putting literal contaminants in the clouds over major cities like San Francisco. So, I mean, yeah, they breathe the same air if they're outdoors. They don't breathe the same air if they spend most of their time being blue bloods indoors with their air purifiers right next to wherever they are, with central air pumping in the best of the best air at the expense of the common person who has to pay their fucking bills. Like, I mean, yeah, they breathe the same air. That's not a real argument, because all it's doing is refusing to admit the possibility that they might not give a shit.
Right.
Also, if they're spraying their contaminants, they might have the antibodies. They might have better vaccines that they get than us proles. Nah, that would never happen, that they get better medical treatment than the fucking low-class people. That doesn't happen at all.
There's so many rabbit holes. David, if you got anything, ask it now, because I can keep going on this. I got a ton of shit.
No, to me, I think that a lot of it, they really are trying to supposedly do what they're saying, which is combat global warming or climate change or whatever they want to call it today. And that I have never heard the possibility that they could just be testing something. And I haven't even thought about that. And that's very true when Jeremy said that. But yeah, other than that, I don't have much to say. It's hard to get a word in edgewise with you guys, but that's fine.
Well, and I just, for people who think that I'm just being a fucking wingnut, Business goddamn motherfucking Insider wrote an article on them poisoning San Francisco. A person died. So, I mean, no, they don't do that anymore. Yeah. We're more advanced now. That's barbarism. No. They're fucking still poisoning the Middle East with depleted uranium, and babies are still being born infected. They don't give a shit. You're fucking cannon fodder, prole.
Yep. The separation between the elites and everybody else. So this is two-pronged here. One thing is a Jopra, the Joe Rogan that I listened to interview, talking about why Google Glass failed, because people were uncomfortable having the glass there and knowing that someone else had access to the recording and all that stuff. So they've decided to internalize it more, both with contact lenses and soon brain implants. And I can't remember, it was a big publication that was writing about Google's new idea for a brain implant that's pretty much going to allow you to download information to your brain like you saw in the Matrix.
Neuralace.
Okay, Neuralace. And so doing that is going to give people instant access in their mind to all of the information in the world. And so one of the possible outcomes of that is incredibly smart people, right?
Or a hive mind that's easy to control.
Or hive mind.
Or because that's part of the problem. Yeah, your Neuralace can program information. Wow, shit. that can't at all possibly be used to also control other neurons.
Right, and that's the obvious thing, right? That's the thing that we know. If you let the government put something in your fucking head, or Google, who's obviously in bed with the government,
or Facebook,
if you let them put fucking something in your head, that is most likely what's going to happen. But let's take that out of the equation and think of the movie Elysium, where there was
haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Okay, so the world's more of a shithole than it is now, just completely depleted of resources. It's just a giant slum, and everyone who lives on surface toils in the factories to build all these awesome products. Advanced medical pods where you can go in and have anything healed.
The proles.
Yeah, exactly.
And
robotics.
Let me guess, the
elites
elites are the only ones who get it.
They get it, yep, and they live up in a ring above the earth, right?
Oh, dude. Asgardia. It's a real fucking space kingdom that they're trying to make. And they're trying to make it into a ring colony like what you're describing.
What?
Yes.
So
you can already become a citizen of Asgardia, by the way.
I've seen that.
We'll finish this topic, though. I could go on for
we're
fucking a while.
We're going to jump back into that, for sure. But I'm thinking that this could lead to a true class separation because of how expensive it will be to get the implant and have access to that stuff. And
especially if it's normalized.
Exactly. Just leave everyone else behind and then deny access to anybody else.
It's sort of like I read this article because I don't follow Avatar. I've never seen an episode of it. And it fucking annoys me that it's as popular as it is because it's fucking terrible.
The anime, The Last Airbender? I thought it was great.
Well, I mean, I'm not into animes about kids. Like, if I'm gonna watch that, I'd much rather watch Devilman Crybaby again.
Whatever, man. Dragon Ball is amazing.
I don't think so.
Dragon Ball, Cowboy Bebop. Dragon Ball Z, Cowboy Bebop.
I don't know, if I'm gonna do anime, it's gonna be something that takes itself super seriously. Like the Studio Ghibli films were fantastic.
I'm the opposite. I like the fantasy escape, Sword Art Online.
I've never seen an episode of that.
I don't get much into it, but those are like the 3 I've seen, so I got a name drop.
My only escapist anime that I really enjoy was Agretsuko, and that's because she's a office working cat that sings death metal. So
that sounds amazing.
Yes, and it's done by the same people in the same style as Hello Kitty, so I mean it's basically Hello Kitty for adults.
I don't get into the kid stuff.
What the hell?
Didn't you just say that?
What?
Hello Kitty for adults, that counts.
What?
As kid stuff.
No, these were adult characters though.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was saying.
Fair enough. Either way, so I think there's the possibility for the class separation. Now back to you, when I described Elysium, you brought up, that's exactly this thing that they're talking about.
Yep.
What do you think of soft information drops through Hollywood and things like that? Do you think that's a real thing, that they let out bits and pieces of what they're doing to get people ready?
I mean, possibly. To me, like, they wouldn't do that because they're already making Elysium seem like the place where the bad guys are. But Asgardia was pretty much inevitable. Whenever humans fucking jet their fucking human sperm onto another part of the planet, they fuck it up, so they might as well fuck up space too. I mean, it just seems like it's inevitable either way. I think that it's, because space colonization by humans has been supposed since, like, the days of Star Trek, in terms of fiction. Yeah. So I just, maybe Elysium is about that. Maybe Elysium is, like, the elites telling us that. I kind of doubt it, because, Matt Damon is the good guy in that, and he's a super liberal in real life who probably would never support Elysium.
Yeah, he would, because he's an elite.
He's an elite, but he always has to at least play the role of the underclass in real life,
so they're
too.
Relatable.
Right, but no, I'm saying in real life too, like that video where he went off against that Reasons TV reporter for...
I heard he was a dick in real life, so I don't know.
I'm a dick in real life, so, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I do see the soft information drops like you were talking about. I do see that as being real. I kind of doubt that the Elysium thing is that, because, I mean, if that's the case, then Deep Space Nine preceded that by, like,
Sure.
20 years.
And a lot of people say that it's the movies that bomb that are the ones with the actual information. Like, I believe was it Jupiter Ascending, that fucking awful movie with Channing Tatum and Mila Kunis?
Haven't seen it, but you're saying Channing Tatum and Mila Kunis, so I already know it's terrible.
It was awful. I watched it because I have a friend he calls himself a truther, and has gone down some insane rabbit holes, and talking about that stuff with me, and he was like, "Dude, you got to watch this. This is it. They're farming people. Like, there's aliens farming people, and they're telling us in this movie." And I was like, "Well, that's a really bad movie with really good graphics. So I don't know what to think here because I don't see any evidence."
The Matrix did fantastically.
Yeah, exactly. The Matrix. That's been a theme.
Yeah. Well, this is.
I think that a lot of this is just people seeing things in movies that they think, "Oh man, that's fucking sweet," when they're a kid, and then they grow up and they become a scientist or whatever.
Well, then,
They're like,
but then
"Let's
you
try to
have
make
people.
this, 'cause why not? They're giving me a bunch of money."
The people who are truthers, Mark Passio, he says that all these things are information, soft information drops. Yeah, and then the Matrix though is not, because it's made by good people to expose what we're living in. So it's kind of a pick and choose thing. And sorry if I'm misrepresenting him, but that's what I got from it. Yeah.
Well, I
Go
just
ahead and misrepresent Posse all you want.
He's got some good information, you know. What do we say? Baby in the bathwater. Jeremy said that the other day on one of your posts too. So
throw all the babies out with that one, man. Fuck the baby.
Let's not get back into our last episode.
I just like my particular bias against Passio is that he restructures and redefines fucking everything in order to make his points.
Yes.
And so his sheep followers don't pay attention to whether or not he's being accurate and good faith. They just take these things that he's saying and repost them. Like those fucking slides from his presentations where he's like, "Oh, violence is always bad," but it's literally not. And
I gotta say, I was on that track for a while. I rescind that. I was wrong.
Well,
he makes the distinction between violence and force, because violence, violate, and that it just sounds like it. It's not even the origin of the word.
It's folk etymology is what they call it. They call it that when it's not actual etymology, but when it sounds like it's etymology.
Real eyes realize real lies. Fuck, I hate that shit.
Get out.
If anyone ever requests me and that's on their page as their banner or whatever, that's an insta delete.
Or like that fucking dumb copy pasta where it's like, "She believed he lied."
Oh God.
I like the memes about that though. That one's pretty good. They've taken that to the level it needed to be.
Yeah, but people unironically believe the original source material, so I think that just, it's like, no matter, you can't win that meme war because there are too many stupid people.
Sure. Now that's the problem with everything, I think. Not that I'm not a stupid person, but
absolutely.
See, the thing is, you've been talking with me on a good level about a lot of this stuff. I don't think you're stupid, so I mean.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
But like, that's the thing. People get the idea that if you're against the establishment, you must also be correct.
Okay.
It's that confirmation bias I was talking about again. And Mark Passio is, in fact, against the establishment. I don't think he's a pawn or a plant. I think he thinks he's legitimately trying to help. So I don't hate Mark Passio, but his followers, a lot of them are just fucking.
I'll give it that.
Like, I deadass had to defend the idea of defensive force the other day, and somebody was saying defensive force doesn't exist because when you're stopping somebody from doing something that's wrong to you, that's not force. No, it is force. Fuck you. It's force. I'm using force. It's physical force. It's physics. It's physics that match a philosophy, and if you don't think it's forcing them to stop, if you don't think defensive force exists, then I hope you get hit by a truck that you're trying to stop.
Well, I was lucky enough to have Andrew Merrick kind of open my eyes a bit, and that's what's his podcast? Is that Bodhi Agora? If you haven't seen that, check that out.
It's Radio Agora.
Radio
I don't know
Agora.
if he still does his stuff.
Yeah, he was doing some stuff lately. Either
Go
way,
follow Andrew Merritt. He's awesome.
yeah, and check out Radio Agora. But I was talking about with him the violence versus force thing, and I was like, well, if it's force, it's not violence. I can't remember the specifics, but he said, so what if I violently throw a bag of trash into a trash can? Is that a violation? I'm like, okay, you got me there.
No, you're just becoming Antifa, right? Violating those trash cans.
That's true.
See, and that's the, like, I have a regular resource I tap because it's amazing. It's called Online Etymology Dictionary. They have direct reference to the roots of the words, and they don't make any bones about it. If it's a guess, they say it's a guess. They say probably. But where they get things right is where they're analyzing direct, like, root words. And a lot of the time, a word will sound like another word because it has a similar root, but the root doesn't mean what the word, like, two words, same root, meaning of word does not reflect on the root, so that this word has to mean the same thing that this word means. These two aren't etymologically connected but by parent. And when people try to shortcut and say, because this is, this must also be, they miss the boat, especially when they miss the languages that are used. For instance, government is not mind control.
Mm-hmm. That's a Passio favorite.
It's gubernare. It's a German word, and they turned it into an English word, sort of like Schule. Schule was a German word.
Or kindergarten.
Yeah, adapted to the Prussian Schule system. And it was eventually turned into English, school, and, you know, government comes from gubernare, or gubernara.
I think there's a French origin for part of it as well. Or is that the one where he was getting the mind control one, the French origin? That was
the Latin roots to steer the mind.
Okay.
And it's not that, like, he's mixing two different languages and trying to say that because of those two roots, that's what it means. It's not. And then whenever I say that to somebody who follows him, yeah. Well, and then whenever I say that to somebody who follows him, and like they're one of his true believers or whatever, they always get very offended with me and say that I'm, like, allowing the elites to change the word. No, you're doing that because you're trying to form a new dictionary ad hoc. Fuck you.
I agree. I agree.
Nick and I used to get into it about Mark Passio occasionally, so
I'm still sticking with. I like some of his shit. I like his.
I always agreed with you.
Yeah.
That he had some good stuff. But then there was some stuff that was like, wow, really, man? Come on.
Well, I was sitting and listening to like 6-8 hours of Mark Passio a day while I was doing shit, and I was just like, what the fuck, with no other influence. So.
Yeah, that's dangerous business, man. I used to listen to too much Alex Jones, but thankfully I knew my, at least analysis of it. Not, yeah, I can't even find the right word, man.
At least he's entertaining though. I fucking love watching Alex Jones go fucking nuts. They're turning the freaking frogs gay. Love it.
And that's another one, like the frog gay thing. It was frogs female, and the guy who did the quote research had a bunch of findings that weren't really concurrent with, facts or reality. And everybody thinks atrazine now poisons animals, and it's like, I mean, you can't prove it, but fantastic job. You got a guy on.
Yeah, he was. I don't know. It was a sketchy dude to bring on too. I saw that video. It was weird.
Like, I mean, he might seem legitimate, and honestly, like, he's a scientist. Scientists are nerds, and they often, look kind of sketchy, but like they're much more introverted, and that's why they spend a lot of their time focused on one thing, because they spend a lot of their time indoors, so they can be like, they can seem physically sketchy, but like, when people just take the idea of that and they run with it, because, like, for instance, he was on Democracy Now! Or whatever, when they do that, they miss the boat, because the idea isn't to just take what one guy says and be like, my heart goes out to you, man, you're a truth warrior.
Right.
The idea is to say, this guy said this, a bunch of other people say this, why are they saying what they're saying? And really look into it, like, go down the rabbit hole, instead of being just like, well, we've got a guy who worked at a place saying he knows a thing.
Sure.
That appeal to authority is cancer.
Yep, absolutely.
So, I mean, so what if a frog turned female? I mean, MK Ultra exists in history books. They burned a lot of the research that they went over, and fucking, it's not, Ultra wasn't the only program. It started out as Artichoke. It became Ultra and Search and, like, MK Ultra 68 and all these other programs that were permutations of the MK program still exist to today. But since MK Ultra got canceled, we can close up shop. No. Sure. And so that's a conspiracy that was directly impacting humans, like, verifiably. We don't need to look for fucking female frogs. We've got kids having their brain wiped with electroshock therapy to the point where they can no longer recall anything and are reverted to the age of children, when they were like 13 or 14. And then being reprogrammed with new instructions using the suggestive enhancement of lysergic fucking... I forget what the last particular word was.
LSD.
Yeah, but LSD. Yeah. Fucking... That's still happening. There's still MK Search. There's still all these programs that happened after the MK program, and there's probably a shit ton more that we don't know about, because guess what? There are black sites. There are people going missing. There are terrorists. They're terrorists that the U.S. government is keeping in places like Gitmo. There are, people who are verifiably still being victimized. I don't give a shit about frogs. Can we focus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, locally around here, you can find what is it? I read a thing the other day that there was cocaine or something and a bunch of other things, and methamphetamine found in the aquatic life. It's like,
in the fish in the bay.
Yeah, just
in the shellfish.
Flu. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the government. This was another conspiracy Corbett went over on his show that I've talked about in the past on Moment of Rage, where the CIA imported drugs from other countries to the U.S. and helped grow the inner city crack and cocaine markets so that they could start arresting people, so that they could have a mass incarceration program, so that they could have free and cheap labor for the second half of the 13th Amendment to allow them to have modern-day slavery, and nobody gives a shit, because if you talk about it, you're a conspiracy theorist.
And on that note, too, of forced vaccinations, like, everyone says, just shut the fuck up and get a vaccination because vaccinations work. Well, what about the forced syphilis that they injected people with?
Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
Tuskegee, under the guise of vaccinations.
Well, and they were, like, they said, we'll give you free health care.
The guys of free health care.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
I mean, if vaccines work, great. Just don't fucking force me to have something injected in me. I'm not interested in the government telling me to do that.
Well, especially since they could then put whatever they wanted in you. And, like...
Oh, but wait, the packaging says it's okay, Remember that. The packaging says.
Yeah, well, I don't trust the packaging of a drug that has a smaller warning label than this energy drink, so.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm vaccinated against tetanus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have the most recent flu vaccine, but I'm vaccinated against tetanus because the vaccine is time-tested, safe, and effective. They don't know that about these new strain tests. They don't know that the vaccine is extremely safe and effective. They know that they have a vast test population that they can force this into, and they know that they've got a state apparatus to make sure it happens, or take the poor people that, you know, can't afford to get fined and threaten them with $1,200 and 6 months in prison and CPS taking their kids. And it's tyranny.
It is.
And nobody gives a shit, you know, because the measles outbreak that killed like maybe 6 people and also only affected like maybe 8,000 total in the multi-million like person country.
Well, why? Okay, so that's another thing. Why is it such a big deal that there's an outbreak and that there's, you know, you need to have your vaccine for the measles when in not the very distant past, it was a thing when a kid caught the chicken pox, the measles, whatever. Your neighbor came over and all the kids played. Everybody got it at a time when their body could handle it, and then they had lifetime immunity without getting shot up with whatever's in there.
See, because it sounds good on the surface, you know, just let him get sick.
Mm-hmm.
But measles can have severe long-term
Sure.
health effects. It can blind your kid. It can give them permanent brain damage. It can, like, it's sort of like syphilis. Like, it can affect multiple organ systems in the body. I would get my kid vaccinated, not as a baby, not like newborn baby. I'm not going to do that thing that was actually more likely the cause of the MMR vaccine backfiring on babies, and get my kid vaccinated before they even their body even knows what germs are. But I'm going to get my kids vaccinated because I don't want them to have multi-organ failure.
That's interesting because I was just reading, I was lurking a conversation the other day of 2 mothers who'd had the sick party.
Mm-hmm.
They're letting their kids, I think it was chicken pox, could have been measles. I'm not sure, something like that. But I think the point of that was in a controlled environment, monitoring the sickness, and you have a family doctor or something there as well. But that's not to say that you can stop it from causing damage to those systems either.
Mm-hmm. Especially since a lot of people don't know what immune compromisation their kid might have.
Sure.
And one of the worst ways to find out about that would be to have a dead kid.
Yeah. Well, one of the worst ways to find out about the dangers of vaccines would be have your newborn injected with 30 to 40 different vaccines, which was that it's 10 times the amount it was 20, 30 years ago.
I think that's what does it.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
think
an
it's
overload.
all at once. I got kids, and I have another one on the way who will be vaccinated, and my previous children are vaccinated, but I made sure that they didn't get them all at once, because that's no matter what, it's going to be a shock on the system. Like,
Right.
Common sense.
Well, and if you get them in stages, it takes longer, but their system has longer to adapt. Also, so deeply frustrating. A lot of these parents that get their kid vaccinated, they think, bloop, that's all, they're going to be healthy. And then they give them formula instead of breast milk. They don't give them contact with the floor or any germs. And then what do you know? The kid has a poor immune system because it grew up without learning to develop antibodies. So
exactly.
It's not the be-all and end-all.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get vaccines.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
You know?
I fully plan on throwing my kids outside regularly.
Yeah.
Roll around, you little son of a
what I do.
bitch.
And, like, teaching them to work with their hands. Because, like, a lot of people these days don't work with their hands because they don't think they need to, and they take it into the shop or whatever. And in doing so, they don't get a lot of that integumentary system immune buildup. Being skin, by the way, for those of you who aren't well versed in this shit. your integumentary system builds up a stronger likelihood of fast white and helper cell responses if you get dirty more often. I mean, obviously wash your hands when you come in, but let your kids play in the mud. Like, there was this fear a short while back of a flesh-eating bacteria that will kill your kids if you aren't careful. Well, yeah, if they don't wash their fucking hands and if they put them in their mouths afterwards. If you're a shitty parent and your kid gets hit by a car, it is not the driver's fault.
Yep.
If you're a shitty parent and your kid is babysat by the media and shoots up a school, it is not the TV's fault. If you're a shitty parent and your kid contracts a severe illness because they didn't wash their hands, it's your fault. Not the fault of the fucking ground. Not the fault of a generation that just isn't as civilized as we are now and won't be clean and Purell everything and put bubble wraps on the corners and give our kids safe spaces.
Put a fucking helmet on them, bubble wrap them,
Yeah.
and then douse them in hand sanitizer, and you're good to go. I think we're coming close to an hour, but I want to jump down one more rabbit hole if you got time, David.
Yeah, do it.
We were you just mentioned shooting up a school. What do you think about psychotropic drugs being found in the systems of most people who have done that?
Well, first off, I don't know that most statistic is true, but
The headliners. I don't know. That's what they say. Fuck, I can't name them all off the top of my head, but
Dylan Roof comes to mind.
Dylan Roof, the dude who shot Gabrielle Giffords.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Roof was not the Aurora shooting, the theater shooting. That was, I can't remember his name, but him.
Well, whatever. I don't want to, do the Legion of Monsters thing where we say the name and
Sure.
make him famous. But either way, like,
Yeah, I don't like using the name.
well, because likely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because yes, there's a strong possibility of that, but there's also the fact that a lot of these kids were treated poorly as kids. Like, the drugs were there, yes, but in terms of conspiracies, the real conspiracy here, the overarching conspiracy, is neglect and abuse. Parents who don't treat their kids well will give fucked up kids. The fact that this is controversial in some circles is evidence of our doomed civilization and the reason that we're all going to die.
What about FBI contact with the shooters beforehand? The Marjorie Stone Douglas shooting in Florida, the one that David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez came out of for anti-gun control stuff.
I mean, I'm not sure about the FBI contact stuff, to be honest.
That was reported by the parents multiple times. The kid was visited by FBI before the supposed shooting, and then there's also multiple eyewitness accounts of the kid walking, like, from other students walking with them while the shooting was happening. Like, a girl said, he was walking right next to me, and I said, everyone thought this was gonna be you doing this, and he's like, what? And then they brought down the kid she was talking to as the shooter.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. You can find those clips online of her saying that.
Well, I'll definitely look into it, but that is certainly weird.
That's a weird one, and there's another weird one that it's very explainable because of the way the human mind acts during a crisis. But there was a teacher who there are clips that have been since pulled. I don't know if you can find them, but you can look. But she said she was at the top of a stairwell, her classroom, and she heard the gunshots getting closer, and she was trying to bring kids into the classroom to keep them safe. And she looked, and she said, I saw the shooter. It was an adult male in full tactical gear.
Oh, I've seen that video, yeah. I mean, see, the thing is, like, this is the next level of conspiracy where you doubt everyone. Yeah, maybe. I mean, but also, I'm not a #BelieveWomener. Like, conspiracies exist everywhere, and one of the big one is, like, this sudden believe victims mentality, where instead of assessing whether or not they indeed are victims and basing your mentality off of proof, you just have to believe anyone who #MeToos something. And so maybe she saw somebody in body gear, or maybe she's just dumb and attention seeking.
Yeah, or just doesn't remember what she saw because it was traumatic.
Yeah, or, is on psychotropic drugs and
Sure.
hallucinated. I mean, stress can make the mind do a fun.
I just think there's a lot of inconsistencies with a lot of the shootings that get massive media coverage, like the Las Vegas shooting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, like, a lot of these things, the elites don't mind us mulling around for details, because ultimately it doesn't matter. They get their measures, they get their polarizing event, they get their balkanization,
A lot of gun sales in the, the fear of gun control being enacted.
Right, and of course the amping up for civil war.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's that too. So like, yeah, maybe she saw somebody like that, maybe fucking the media doesn't want us to know about the vigilantes who know about this stuff in advance and are trying to stop these people.
Sure.
Maybe Travelers is real, and
That'd be fucking something.
Netflix show is real, and these people are actually like fucking people from the future set to set things right, and we're all just conspiratory, like the conspiracy theorist in it. Have you seen Travelers, the TV show?
I haven't.
Okay, I will not spoil it because I was about to, but watch it.
Okay.
Because it's actually pretty entertaining and also very thoroughly done. Like I'm
gonna need a Netflix hookup.
I fucking
I got you.
Oh yeah.
I got you.
I was disappointed by one show. And have either of you? Well, I mean, you don't have Netflix, but have you seen Sense8, David?
Sense8?
Number 8.
Oh, Sense8. No, I have not.
It's a fun concept and occasionally executed very well, but the fact is that they were trying to cram too many different storylines with too many different tones into the same piece, and so it jumped around a lot. But part of the thing of that is a secret organization that the series got canceled before they could really go into, of people who are like a more advanced version of humans, and this more advanced version of humans can experience, like binaural lace kind of thing, only it's psychic, any of the people in their cluster around the world. They can experience what they're experiencing at that point. And basically the series postulates that this is how pre-language civilizations were, and that the language-bearing civilizations are actually a devolution of humanity that doesn't get it right, because the more advanced humans can telepathically communicate the way that they're feeling, like smelling, tasting, all that. And that's the way to convey messages without having to use words. And those people are called sensates in this universe. I was disappointed by it, but it's an interesting concept, in the same way that OA was, where the girl is experimenting with D8 crystal theory, essentially, which is a multi-dimensional universe theory where they like the past, present, and future are all happening right now and affecting each other independently of one another, and where multiple universes split off at any given point, like an infinite number of them, and in OA they can bounce to different universes or jump because they're connected deeply enough with the people that comport with that universe. Like it's a close enough timeline that they can jump. And I'm not gonna go into why, and I'm not gonna like spoil any of these series. But if you want to get into some esoteric shit that might be signaling what the elites are trying to accomplish with things like CERN, you want to talk like, event, soft drops of information, you want to talk obelisks and fucking crystallization, those 3 series would be series to look into. because they all play on concepts like that. I think OA did it the best of the series that I've seen. OA is the best executed version of it. So it depends on whether or not you want to have an increasingly good time or a time where you see the best and then are eventually gradually more and more disappointed. If you want the ascending order, watch Sense8, Travelers, and then OA. If you want descending, just reverse that. But I would recommend watching those because it's a fictional, fun way of getting into some of what the elites might be trying to accomplish. You know, and it even goes into some of that. And like OA, it's kind of hokey a little bit, but it has its points. And part of the point is that people communicate in ways that are inefficient, and the elites are always trying to figure out ways to master more efficient communication. So like that's the neural ace we were talking about. That's the mass media indoctrination. That's the school. That's the reason kids are given school. But eventually, if they can vaccinate your kids now by force and fine you if you don't get your kid vaccinated, the next step is the chip. The next step is the implant in the brain. And the next step is the neural lace. And the next step is total lockdown control. So just keep that in mind the next time the elites decide that your civilization and society depend on your community being locked down for fear of a measles outbreak that is still affecting less than 1% of the population.
Hell yeah. Well, that's a good place to end it, I think. Hell of a good rant at the end there. We are going to go to, after this, a real quick Q&A if anyone from the $5 patrons has questions, if they're around. If you want to be a part of the Q&A, or even a part of the live recordings while we're recording this, because we are streaming this privately on YouTube for our patrons. At the $1 tier, you can hop on and be a part of the live recordings and have the opportunity to donate and ask questions during the recording. And at the $5 tier, you get that plus exclusive Q&A with our guests and us every week. So this is episode 33. Next episode is 34, and that will be on Sunday. This one did come out late, so we'll have that one for you on time. And I believe that one is with our excellent mod, Conrad Chaos, from the Discord. So hit us up for an invite link to the Discord. You also have your own private channels if you join the Patreon. Thanks for watching, everyone who watched. Thanks for listening, everyone who's listening and watching after. And we'll catch you next time.